Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating, incredibly intense operational playbook. It's called the Strategic Toolkit for ICT Leadership in Harsh Environments. Now, I want you to imagine, just for a second, stepping into the role of the P5 Chief of Section for Information Systems and Telecommunications. And you're doing this at the UN Support Office in Haiti. You aren't just managing an everyday IT help desk here. You're operating right in Port-au-Prince, which is a high-stakes arena defined by rolling blackouts, stifling heat, and highly unpredictable physical security. The pressure is absolutely immense. The stakes? Well, they're literal mission survival, and your margin for error is razor thin. So we're going to explore the exact strategic toolkit you'd need to lead and actually succeed under these extreme conditions.
Okay, let's dive right into this massive challenge out of the gate. Seriously, how do you build a digital lifeline in a harsh environment with little to absolutely zero infrastructure? In a context like this, technology is not just about, issuing laptops or pushing software updates. We have to frame technology as a literal mission survival tool. When physical security, power constraints, and connectivity issues are literally dictating your every move, things like resilience and recoverability, they have to become your primary design inputs from day one. They can't just be contingency plans you tack on as an afterthought. So let's open up this strategic toolkit together and unpack 5 critical components. We've got the harsh environment challenge itself, the mindset of deliberate urgency, the architecture for extreme resilience, the human element, and finally, the overarching mission-first philosophy. Let's jump in. Starting with Part 1, the harsh environment challenge, specifically looking at operating in Port-au-Prince. Consider for a moment the stark contrast between building a standard corporate IT house and building a disaster-proof forward operating base. In the corporate world, right, the focus is so often on maximizing cutting-edge technical sophistication. Everybody's always chasing the absolute newest features. But for a UN mission, the priority isn't the shiny new toy at all. It is entirely about resilience, recoverability, deployability, and absolute mission continuity. Because honestly, a highly sophisticated platform is completely useless to you if it can't be securely administered by the staff you actually have, or if you can't recover it during a major crisis.
Which brings us to Part 2, the mindset of deliberate urgency, and how we balance speed and traceability. The really crucial point here is understanding exactly what deliberate urgency actually means in practice. Out in the field, the urgency is incredibly real, but ungoverned speed, that's dangerous. Acting super fast without any governance just creates immediate security exposure, and it piles up this future technical debt that eventually becomes wildly expensive and super fragile. Deliberate urgency is that perfect sweet spot. It means acting quickly where the operational need is crystal clear, but deliberately preserving your traceability, your risk awareness, and your accountability. You absolutely must maintain the ability to safely recover from any decisions that, well, just don't perform the way you expected them to.
Moving right along to Part 3. Architecture for extreme resilience and its interlocking pieces. Now, this perfectly illustrates the golden rule of this entire playbook. Weakness in any one management discipline will completely undermine your otherwise sound technical choices. Just think about how these dependencies interlock. You could build literally the most resilient architecture in the world, but if you have no trained staff, it's going to fail in a crisis. You can deploy a highly secure platform, but if the support is totally unusable, your users are just going to invent really unsafe workarounds. If you've got well-run procurement but absolutely no lifecycle analysis, well, you're basically just buying future cost pressure. And a beautiful management dashboard that's fed by unreliable data, that just produces highly confident, completely incorrect decisions. When your infrastructure is this minimal, you simply cannot afford to accumulate complex systems. It just doesn't work. Instead, the toolkit demands a really strict focus on what we call the minimum viable service. You have to rely on portable connectivity, power resilience, and incredibly robust manual fallbacks. You need explicit, step-by-step sequences for restoring capability, simplified support models, and an absolute, non-negotiable understanding of what must come back online first. That is exactly what will save the mission during a major disruption.
That takes us to Part 4, the human element and how it drives sustainable performance. Because as we just saw, a digital lifeline relies on so much more than just cables or organizational charts or fancy hardware. High performance and sustainable service delivery depend heavily on human factors. A chief has to actively coach their personnel and deliberately distribute critical knowledge, so the entire mission doesn't just collapse if one highly specialized expert decides to leave. And a truly critical factor here is psychological safety. You desperately want a culture where risks and errors are raised early. The last thing you want is staff hiding problems until they erupt into massive mission-stopping incidents.
At the end of the day, the human element is your ultimate security control, and it's your absolute best continuity plan. And finally, part 5, the mission first philosophy. This is our blueprint for action. This is where all those elements we talked about, the environment, the mindset, the architecture, and the people, actually translate into a cohesive, measurable roadmap. The toolkit gives us a concrete first 100-day and multi-year transformation model. Phase 1, that is all about triage. You establish your baseline, map out your critical services, validate the major risks, and stabilize any urgent weaknesses. You absolutely do not innovate until that foundation is rock solid. Then, you move to Phase 2, where you can modernize the architecture and strengthen security. Finally, Phase 3 is where you institutionalize continuous improvement, upgrading data analytics, and really developing your people. This specific sequenced execution is what ensures a leader can drive transformation without accidentally destabilizing the very services the mission relies on every single day.
Now, a framework like this forces leaders to communicate trade-offs completely transparently. Let's be real, you cannot simultaneously optimize speed, cost, customization, and security. It's literally impossible. If you decide to prioritize deployment speed, well, the trade-off is increased technical debt, which you then have to mitigate with strict lifecycle reviews. If you mandate maximum security, you're probably going to significantly reduce usability. A mature IT section doesn't try to create this false illusion that every single risk is eliminated. Instead, it takes unresolved risk and makes it visible, makes it owned, and clearly communicates it to senior leadership so they can actually make informed decisions.
And this quote right here? This is basically the ultimate mic drop. It perfectly encapsulates the mission-first philosophy of this entire toolkit. Your goal as a leader isn't to build some massive tech empire. It is strictly to enable the mandate of the mission. Every dashboard you build, every cloud deployment, every risk register, every single training session, it is ultimately about making the mission's work more reliable, more secure, connected, informed, and adaptable. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If your primary systems failed today, like right now, is your residual risk visible? Is it owned? And is it actually proportionate to what matters most? Evaluating your own digital operations through the lens of this extreme environment toolkit is just a really powerful way to pressure test your own operational leadership. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep building those resilient lifelines.